Welcome to Friday night's video in our second master series. I do believe this is the 24th video in our second master series and the 6th video dealing with oscilloscopes. So we are going to talk about visualizing while we're processing. Now this is basically a heads up video because when we get farther along in this series, it's going to become really apparent the understandings that we've talked about so far when talking about the oscilloscope of what that means, and for you to really get used to visualizing patterns. What is happening? What do certain things look like? And how does it relate it on the oscilloscope for you to get used to these things? For me to go through and make a bunch of videos on the oscilloscope like that, it would be ridiculous. When we get farther along in the series and looking at processors and effects and looking at things we do in the DAW and what that looks like, it will become way more apparent the usefulness of the oscilloscope, that you are really going to get used to seeing things happening so you see the processing of what's happening. Now I'll give you an example. This video is just to give you a heads up. So we're not going to get really in depth and show you a bunch of things, but I'll make a really simple statement so that you can understand the importance of this. This, we talked about before. Let's say I've got this bass note, right? And the bass note has this pattern that I look at. Now, let's say I process it a certain way. And, I know what that bass note clean normally looks like, and I'm trying to dirty it up or do something with it. And I get it to where it sounds right, and it's producing this other footprint that eventually, as I get used to seeing that happen, then I know when I'm getting close to my target or I'm getting farther away from my target. Now, this goes with any type of sound or any type of processing. So anytime you're affecting the sound, so whether it's equalization, reverberation, distortion, whatever you might be doing to it, that it's going to alter the footprint. So as you get used to being able to see that and being able to visualize a target is the target, because if you've got this, let's say this is a perfectly, processed bass note, and I've really shot for this footprint that I'm normally used to seeing, and yeah, it's going great. I know when I'm getting closer to it or when it's starting looking like things that don't look like it's normally supposed to. And I've got this other thing that we talked, like let's say this is the guitar or something, and it's like that's what I'm normally used to hearing or seeing, or something really similar to it. Sometimes you don't want it exactly, you're going, well, it's not an exact replica of my footprint that I'm used to seeing. Well, is it close? I mean, the closer you get, sometimes you find that you're processing, that you're looking at on a spectrogram that you don't really see it. You're looking on a level meter, you're never going to see it. You're trying to listen to it. You can hear when you're closer to it. And if you reference it, you can go, okay, yeah, no, A, B, and back and forth. Yeah, I'm getting closer. With the scope, you can really see if you're getting close to it. You can be going, well, no, this guitar normally looks like this, but I've got this little jump here or some other thing going on that's not that pattern. So if I'm doing some kind of processing, I'm adding too much of something, or until I'm at least getting closer, because it might not be an exact replica, looking at it. If you look at this one over time, that it's really obvious that it's got, you see this little jump right here and a little jump right there and a little jump right there that's in between this more roundy choppiness, that it's pretty periodic, semi-periodic, or periodic, in what's going on. You look at this kind of stuff going on, and to me, I'd say this is more likely semi-periodic waveform, but it's a target. So when I start processing that, normally I've got let's say for an example that I had this, and I know this is a clean bass note, but I'm shooting for this. Basically, this is my processing is what's going to happen. So as I get used to doing certain types of processing, I see what's happening. Now, a simpler version of that is I've got this. Now, this is a clean guitar note, bung, or a clean piano note, ding, before I've put equalized it, saturation, or anything. So, as I start to do any processing, that whatever I'm doing starts to bring me closer to what I'm used to seeing. Now, this concept is very difficult. It's almost the same kind of concept as, okay, trying to understand that you're a master audio engineer and you're trying to explain to somebody of how to saturate a guitar or add a little bit of noise, saturation, and da 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 da, or to a vocal to get it sound perfect. You're going to EQ a vocal. Okay, so I'm trying to tell somebody how to EQ a vocal perfect. I put an EQ series on my first master series, and I thought you're going to have to experiment with it because that's basically what you're trying to do, and you're going to have to work until you figure out it sounds good to you because of the way you're going to do it, not the way Bob's going to do it, because Bob may do it differently. So there's lots of issues whenever you're trying to teach people about that kind of stuff. So as you get used to saying, I've processed this vocal to where it looks like this. This is a normal male vocal, and this is the footprint that I'm used to seeing the way I do it. Bob, if I look at his footprint on the oscilloscope, that's not normally the way I do it, and it looks different. Sometimes it doesn't take much, and sometimes it's very slight differences. I can go and look at, say, Bob has recorded Beyonce, and I got a note of her, and and I'm looking at the way they've processed it. By the time I get done analyzing it, I'm going to see that I've got 4 master engineers that have processed her vocals for this record that's a Grammy record, and their footprints are going to look a little bit different. Now, I'm telling you that these are 10 Grammy audio engineers, and each one of them, if I analyze it and I can give them to give me a track of her going and her processing that they did on it, their footprint's going to look a little different. It just is. There's no way that they will be exactly the same. I know so from experience that they won't be exactly the same, but they all will probably sound good to Bob or to Randy or Jimmy or Timmy. So it came down to, did Beyonce like the way that they did it? And so Beyonce eventually chose one of them. Whether that they were the best or not is probably questionable, but she was happy with them. I don't know. They might have been better. They might have, put a fluffy pillow under her butt, that she's all just kind of happy sitting in the studio and I got tea and a happy pillow. But her engineer really wasn't as good as Bob, who actually did a better job on her vocals. You don't know for certain without really being there. So those 10 engineers, their footprint will be a bit different. You need to get used to seeing that. So I know what Beyonce's vocal would have sounded like when she goes, I know what that's going to look like. Now, what that's going to look like when I get done processing it is the target that I'm going to be shooting at. I'm not shooting for what it looks like if Bob gets done processing it. So this is a huge thing for you to get in your head so that you can understand this rawness and this processing process of you trying to get it to the way you want it to sound, which makes it impossible for you to have a really good footprint until you've really spent the time honing your skills to come out with a really good footprint that you're used to seeing. So you have to start working at becoming a better engineer to be able to spot when something looks good or bad. Does that make sense? So I know that sounds hard ass or something, but it's really true, because as you start to understand when you're starting to do the processing, first of all, what it's doing to that raw material you have. And you will start to see characteristics of whatever processing you're doing start to show themselves on the waveform. And you will see over time when that's too much or not enough, shooting for the target you're looking for. Does that make sense? And so as you get more and more used to seeing that information, it's like we talked about, like, this is really smooth. But if I had to add a whole lot of saturation in the upper end and boost the EQ in the upper end, that this is going to start getting this really fine, roughness around it that's going to show that. And I get used to seeing that type of processing starts to show itself on my spectrometer, where it might not show it as in an easy as I can't see it as easily on my scope. I can't see it at all on any other meters. I'm using my ears, and then I'm looking at my spectrometer, and then I'm looking at my scope for these characteristics that I'm used to seeing, that I've learned to see on the waveform, them showing themselves, and those characteristics of that type of processing happening to a waveform that I'm familiar with. So I know that sounds like a mouthful, and it sounds like, God, bro, you're like trying to make me this audio engineer dude. Yeah, bro, I am, dude. I am. I know. Yeah, dude, I'm going to make you this audio engineer guru that can sit here and do certain types of processing, and you'll start to see its characteristic effects on waveforms that you're used to, which sounds like, well, I'm going to have to practice doing that. Yeah, dude, you're going to have to practice doing that. You just are, I know. And as we go through the second master series, I'm going to even show you what that looks like so that you can start making decisions of whether that's too much or not enough for you, so you can start developing those footprints that are processed perfectly the way you think they should be, so that you can start becoming that awesome audio engineer that, you know, Beyonce likes to come see, because you do it just like that. And you put that little fluffy pillow on her butt and she's happy as camel, and you're just off you go, bro. So yes, and it's basically a lot of work on your part for you to become that, and you just start being able to see that, and you start experimenting with that, and you start to see those characteristic things and those effects of whatever you're doing, so that you can spot those things happening. That might sound stupid, because you sit there and go, no, dude, my ear is perfect. I'll see it, or I'll see it on a spectrogram. No, you won't, bro. I've been doing this for years, bro, and I don't. I know audio engineers that I know that are producing top-notch stuff that I don't really see as audio engineers that are on that type of level, but they've really honed their ears to what they're trying to produce. But would I give them something that would be that next level, that I would be that worried about it? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. And they got a lot of money in the bank, bro. They're not exactly, you know, the idiot on the block. They got a pretty nice studio. They've got some pretty good clientele, but they are not that top-notch audio engineer that I'm trying to make you, because I want you to be able to do this kind of stuff and walk into Sony Music and go, no, bro, I'm pulled out my oscilloscope and I know what those characteristics are. You need to back off with your reverb, or you need to add more saturation. You got too much amber and hiss. I can't really see it on the scope. I can hear it a little bit, but it's getting kind of drowned out in there, and I'm not really sure to pull out my scope. And oh yeah, there we go. I'm seeing that right there. Bam, bro, you are one top-notch audio engineer, because you can see all these characteristics. We're just talking about the scope right now. So, you know, we've talked about your ears and the spectrogram. We haven't gone into some of the other meters, but all these tools, you being able to use them that well and seeing all the characteristics of what sound does to each one of them, that it's going to help you catch things. Because sometimes you'll be going along and you just be going, well, I'm not really sure. Well, trust your eyes, trust your ears, trust your meters. You trust all of them together, especially your scope also, that you probably don't used to using because nobody's taught you that how important it is, and how well you can see how things affected are very visual on a scope, where they might not be on your ears, might not catch it. Your spectrogram is way too much information that you would never pick it out of there, where your scope's going to show it. Your scope's going to show that right now. And so, I mean, that's a true thing. So you look at, even when you're doing audio repair, a lot of times audio repair, I start and I go look at my waveform. You know, what's going on my waveform? I'm seeing some issue. As you get more and more used to seeing that on the scope and understanding what that is, that you're going to be able to take, you're looking at the timeline and that information to a whole nother level of being able to really see processing issues, or what that means. So when you're looking at this and you're looking at this stuff on here, why it looks like that, why it looks like that, what exactly is happening to that waveform of that sound that you're familiar with, and the processing you've done to it to make it look like that all of a sudden. And is that good or bad as far as you're concerned with the way you want things processed? So I know that sounds like a huge mouthful, and it sounds like a lot of work on your part, but it is. as we go through this master series and we start really looking at processing effects and things like that, it will become very obvious. But I really wanted to make it seem that obvious and for you to understand it's that important, so you don't, so you keep going through the second master series to understand the importance of the things that I'm trying to show you. So peace, hope, love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this video on looking at processing with the oscilloscope, and I'll see you in the next video.